Hey guys, I'm Richard Fitzgerald. This is Dubai Works, where we interview the business leaders making a difference in this great city.
That business with scalability was very interesting to me.
I like building something that has legacy.
Good morning. Welcome to another episode of Dubai Works Business Podcast. This week, I'm joined by the CEO of Massar Solutions, Richard Sikkel. Richard used to be in Silicon Valley with Tesla and worked on various prominent roles across the globe. He's now with Massar Solutions, a semi-government organization operating in the UAE since 1998. And today we'll be talking about the future of mobility and the transportation sector in the UAE and the region. Also, the impact of COVID-19 on the business of rental and mobility solutions in the UAE. Finally, we'll discuss what role Massar can play in developing transportation and mobility within the region. Good morning, Richard.
Good morning, Richard.
Thank you for joining us today. You're still working from home?
Yes, I'm working from home, clearly. Kitchen behind me, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So how has everything been for the last few months?
Well, since very early on, so mid-March, most of our staff that can work from home has been working from home. At the same time, a lot of the services that we provide are actually labeled essential services. So many of our Massar team have been working all along. So we have around 1,500 drivers of buses, but also people that deliver groceries at people's homes. So they have been working, but basically all our office staff has been working from home.
A lot of what people talked about during COVID was the supply chain disruption around the world. How has that impacted? Have you been able to operate normally?
Yeah, I have to say we have. So two things in terms of supply chain would be important for us. So one is, of course, where we, for customers like Carrefour and Co-op, we deliver groceries to people's homes. We have seen, of course, that many people started ordering huge amounts of food very early pandemic, and then that flattened out. There was always enough of everything. So I think that part of supply chain has worked very well. The other part of supply chain is of interest to us is parts for vehicles. So we of course own and operate these vehicles that deliver these services, the transportation services, and we need to be able to, of course, maintain those. And we've been able to get those as parts as well through our great partners in the UAE.
Interesting. So I touched on the intro, the heritage and how long Massar Solutions has been operating in the UAE. Can you talk a little bit about the type of business it was at the outset, and also with a nod to the kind of terminology we use on the transport sector now for logistics and supply chain and mobility? How has that industry evolved?
So it's a few questions in there. So the heritage of Massar is that we are actually a spin-off of Adwiya, so a utility provider in Abu Dhabi. A little less than a decade ago, 51% of the shares were sold to Invest AD with the purpose of making the services of Massar, and then the brand Massar was actually born because previously it was called Al Wabla. And under the flag of the name Massar Solutions, we started to provide the same services to other companies as well in the UAE. So these are the services that we used to provide to Adwiya. So this is fleet leasing and also provide in the need of short-term vehicles. But we have expanded that. We have expanded that with commuting services. So many of these gray buses that you see bringing people to their construction sites where they work or hotels. Many of those are Massar buses with Massar drivers. So we basically provide the full mobility package there. And then as I mentioned, if you order groceries from Carrefour or Co-op or others, then very likely those will be delivered to your home by a Massar driver in a Massar van. This is even dual branded, so you would see, for instance, Carrefour and Massar on that van. On top of that, of course, seeing technology also in automotive sector developing very, very fast. We also have a branch that is developing new technical solutions and data solutions for our customer, which I probably will address a little bit later in this.
So just to kind of put it in perspective and context, in any country, do you have independent companies like this, which are for transport fleet, are you know, for the person who doesn't know what goes into running, say, a Carrefour, are they always partnered with a company like yours, or do they have their own fleet? And is this a normal business? Yeah, is there structure here? Would it be normal in say other countries?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. So the global trend is actually that large corporate companies that have an international footprint, they want to work with one or two providers for their fleet. In the end, it's a necessity. You just want it to be arranged well. Maybe want to have a bit of a volume deal, and you typically also want to have a car policy for your staff that is as much as possible similar across the world. So if you look in Europe, almost all corporates work with one of the 5 largest global leasing providers. Actually, my background is also working with one of them. So for a couple of years, for a long time, I worked with Athlon Car Lease, and last few years of that being the president of it, which is one of the 5 largest providers in the world. And typically, these companies have customers that seek a service in multiple countries. So 5, 10, 20 countries implement policies everywhere in the same way. So definitely the global trend. If you look in parts of the world outside of Europe and the US, then it's more fragmented. So in the Middle East, actually as a whole, but also in the UAE, you do not really see the presence of these global. There's just one exception in the UAE, but you don't see a big presence of these global suppliers of fleets in terms of leasing. And actually, this is a trend that we find interesting because we think that at least you would want to see a solution for all of the Middle East, from the Middle East. And I think Massar Solutions is actually the best positioned player to have that role with a heritage in the Middle East. But talking about trends, that's definitely a trend.
Okay, interesting. So just touching on that, would it be correct in saying that Transguard are a similar company in what they do?
I think their range of offering is wider than that. We're more specialized in mobility and fleet. So companies like Transguard would typically work with a partner as Massar for mobility or some of the other services that we provide.
Okay, so speaking of Carrefour, for example, I think we'll be playing a video while we're talking of how would I say, a truck or a service or a fleet that you provided for Carrefour that looks state of the art, that has, and you'll explain in more detail, but it's probably custom made for them. Is that an offering that you do for your clients as well?
So this is a very close partnership, of course. So this is not like just a service that we provide. This is a service that has been developed together with Carrefour. So largely based on their needs, and for us to provide the service that fits those needs. They have always worked with other parties as well, and I think in the last few years together we have discovered that the way Massar offers these services actually works quite well for both. And we are now expanding these services, so we will offer this broader, not so much, of course, as tailored to Carrefour, but more generically. And actually, we hope to follow the footprint of Carrefour in the Middle East and do the same in other countries as well.
Interesting. There's a lot of conferences about future mobility, and there's other themes and topics. But when we look across your offering on your website, it talks about the products, the people, the tech, the fleet, and the auto services. Is that how you see a modern business in your space structured well for the kind of future mobility?
Yes, because we cover a wide range of products that are all built around the needs of companies that need to take care of their mobility. And of course, this is a developing market and our products are developing, but I would say we have a very good, strong core of products that we develop. So there won't be any incredible change in our business lines. What we do now is meets very much the demands of the market, but we're also looking at, of course, future needs and to make sure we're ready for those. Basically, our current strategy is built on trends that we see in the automotive market, and especially, of course, the corporate automotive markets. Just to name a few, one is individualization. So where we have people that have a company car, typically you would just get a new company car every 3 or 4 years, and you would go on and on and on and have a cycle of this 3-4 years every time a new car. When you work 15 years with a company, you may have 3-4 times a new car. That's how the labor markets used to work for a long time, and basically fleet as a result of that. The trend of individualization is that we see that obviously people have shorter cycles in companies. At the same time, you have less job security, so sometimes you can move to another company while it wasn't your own initiative. But also we see a lot of people that offer their services to multiple companies at the same time. And actually before joining Massar, I've done that myself for 6-7 years as well. More as a consultant working for separate companies, but several at the same time. That also translates to mobility needs. So you would need a vehicle, but you would just get your own vehicle and use it for whatever work you're doing that day. Also, it gives a little bit more freedom. So individualization is also to be able to choose the car you like for as long as you want it and where you want it, rather than picking your company car from the short list that your company has provided. In basics, there's nothing wrong with that, but within the trend of individualization, we see that people, company car users, want to have a little bit more their own say in it.
So just to explain that a bit more, so a large company or any company who's providing company cars for their staff will work with you on a leasing basis, and you provide a range of products or services that fits their needs.
Yeah, so that's the typical company car. So maybe let's say a company with 1,500 employees, 300 of those have the right on a company car, and those cars would be supplied by Massar directly, basically. So we invoice the company, but the employees would use those cars.
So the companies in that case don't have their own fleet; they lease it, and it works like that. And the individual trend you're describing is that people you need to be more flexible on the choice of car and the duration.
Exactly, and even the fact to be able to use your car for several people you work for. So more individual, and this is a big trend in Europe and in the US, and I also see it coming up more in the UAE, that people are just more individual and more independent, offering their talents and services either to several employees at the same time or shorter cycles.
So we see some disruption in other industries, and previously on the podcast we had the CEO of eCar, and he discussed how they're offering their rental cars to large companies in that process. Is that a response to this trend? Is that what companies are doing now?
Definitely. So car sharing basically, but also services like Uber and Lyft are very much filling that need for, I think, two things. So more flexibility, but also to find ways around car ownership, or let's say the use of a lease car. So these services typically are for people that actually do not have a company car or do not wish a company car and have probably smaller transport needs and just take the flexibility that an e-car can offer.
Interesting, very interesting. So what are the other trends, if that's the individual one? And I guess it's, for people in context, that, you know, some of the brands that you mentioned, the VC funded companies that listed recently have these high valuations, and at the moment the consumer experiences them on their phone, and in terms of how they would have previously used a taxi, but actually their valuations are high because their promise or their their potential is in other spaces of the transport industry, such as this.
Yeah, and I think also these valuations are based on the potential, the not yet filled potential. That if these offerings of car sharing become the new way of mobility for the world, and basically even replacing, let's say, more traditional models, if that would happen, of course, then the first parties in the market would have a very big, strong edge over others, and would actually probably fill the big shoes though that those high valuations currently offer.
Interesting. So what, before I ask about the other trends, just something that I was thinking of, how do you go about choosing your partners, your suppliers? Which automotive companies do you work with, and what are the key factors in those decisions?
So basically, leasing companies like Massar Solutions will offer the vehicles to their customers that these customers want. Of course, I wouldn't take that for this type of job. We advise there, but it is a joint decision on which fleets are used, and then as a result of that, you choose your supplier. So in the UAE, actually, the number of brands that is used is actually relatively limited. So you will see a lot of Nissan, a lot of Toyota, where I think if I look back to my past in Europe, where in Athlon, there were probably like 20 to 25 brands that were all prevalent to a certain extent, of course, but were all used. So the number of suppliers there was relatively large. You would also work with a lot of different dealerships, where, of course, in UAE, the suppliership is organized a bit differently. So we have a few strong partners that sell us these vehicles, and also do part of the maintenance, because we do part of maintenance ourselves. We also have workshops where we can do maintenance on vehicles, and part of it we also outsource to these same partners.
Interesting. So rather than staying on leasing and the car part of the business too much, but you mentioned auto services as well as something that Massar provides. Is that in the context of someone needs their car serviced, and a customer would go to a Massar car service space, or is it something that how does that work?
Well, actually, the way it works is how the customer wants it. So we have our own workshops. So we have workshops in Abu Dhabi, Dubai, DIP, Al Ain. But typically, actually, our customers, we are the ones that know when the car needs service, actually. So we typically reach out to a customer saying, well, your car needs now a service. It reaches its service interval. When is suitable time for you for us to pick up the car and bring it back to you? So basically, most often, we pick up these vehicles, get them serviced and deliver them back. So it's a full service solution. At the same time, of course, we have people, customers, and especially for small things like oil changes, that just come by one of our workshops and have that service performed.
Okay, interesting. So you're providing the full service. At what point in the trajectory of the company do you identify areas to expand in and offer new services? And is it because you're good at something that you say, okay, we're good at this, let's offer this as well, and do you respond to the demand of the customers?
Yeah, actually it's both. So of course we know our strengths, and we look very intensely at developments in the market, and the whole automotive services industry, especially the leasing part. I think all over the world innovation has been very much based on customer needs. So typically at the side of a customer, we also see very professional specialists in the use of company cars that also know what they want, and often, let's say, on the basis of their needs, we jointly develop new products.
Mm.
So I think a good example is our technology division, where we have very high-end track and tracing capabilities. And this is very much based, well, actually on a legal requirement in the UAE for this type of vehicles, but also because a lot of customers have demands and requirements for very, very high-end reporting. And an interesting development there is actually that we always used to show this is the past of your fleet. Maybe we can learn from it in terms of reducing fuel consumption, in terms of reducing damages. But we now take far more a big data approach. So we collect these data, and of course we look at the past, but we collect and analyze these data of all these vehicles with the purpose of predicting the future. And by predicting the future, we can actually reduce cost, again, in fuel and damages by planning far more efficiently than we have been able to do in the past.
How have you gone about that? Have you set up a different team or department? Is that something that you've invested in, or is it something that you've worked with experts and partners?
No, we've found this such a strategic development that years ago we decided to invest it ourselves. So we have technology partners, but we're not depending on one. We have several technology partners, and basically for any specific project, we will find technology that fits best. And if we can find that with our preferred suppliers, that's great. Otherwise, we will look elsewhere. And we have our own programmers that actually build the interface. So we build the interface with the customer environment ourselves. So a lot of these development is actually Massar Solutions IP.
Interesting. That seems like interesting to strategically bet on a certain area and invest in it. There are other macro trends, and one in transport, and one that's related to big data, such as blockchain. Some other macro trends and that's around the logistics and supply part. And then there's other macro trends like electric vehicles, and then also driverless cars. And, you know, we see big things in your former company, Tesla, have this truck and things like that gets a lot of traction on social media. How do you view, as a CEO of an established transport company, how do you view macro trends and in general, what are your views on it, and how does it impact your business today?
Yeah, of course. So for us, because we have long-term contracts, our contracts typically are 3-4 years, especially for utility vehicles, but most for company cars, that is often still 3 to 4 years. So for us, it's very important to be able to look a little bit further in the future, because we buy vehicles, but we also depreciate to an expected future value. And we have to be able to get that future value correct, because otherwise we'd make a massive loss. Or if we estimate too careful, our monthly leases would be too expensive and it would be too much depreciation in it. So we have to be spot on in predicting future residual values of vehicles. And then if you look at new technologies, you have to really have an opinion, a knowledge-based opinion on those technologies, because, and I think I'll go back to the examples that I've seen in Europe. At some point, if you could see the trend coming that diesels would become less favorable, then reduce your share of diesel vehicles in your fleet. So this is not so much specific for the UAE, but companies that very, very early saw that to walk away from diesel vehicles prevented to have massive losses on the sale of those vehicles. If we look at the UAE, more relevant, I think, is the development of the electric vehicles and to a certain extent autonomous driving. So I think the adoption of electric vehicles will be slightly slower in the Middle East and in the rest of the world, because of course the business case from a fuel perspective doesn't always work the same way as in other countries, because you would have expensive fuel and relatively low cost of electricity, where here the metrics work slightly different. But at the same time, we see a lot of demand from customers for Tesla vehicles, because they are interested in the technology and they also want to understand how this technology may impact their business for the future, or they just love technology and want to understand these vehicles from that perspective. And for us, it's very, very important to understand the cost structure behind electric vehicles, because you could think it's just a vehicle, so depreciation will be quite similar to a similar cost combustion engine type of car. And the maintenance might be the same as well, but it actually is completely different. And I know this from my history working in Europe when electric cars were already coming up, but of course, especially also in my few years at Tesla. Depreciation works very, very different because these cars have actually very, very high residual values and relative low maintenance costs because of almost the lack of moving parts. A Tesla has 14 moving parts, where a combustion engine vehicle may have a few hundred moving parts.
Wow.
So wear of those parts will be a lot less, and there's only so many things basically to replace at service interval. So it's very, very different from a cost perspective, and only if you understand these costs very, very well, you can support your customers making the right decisions.
So do you think that the shift to electric vehicles is more an economical decision process from a company perspective and also from a user? You mentioned in Europe that the fuel prices might be more expensive, therefore it might make more long-term sense to run an electric vehicle, while that's not the case here. We're led to believe maybe that the shift is from an environmental or sustainability decision, but is it more to do with economics?
It's both. It's both.
Okay.
So if you look at the whole cycle so far of let's say, the implementation of electric vehicles in fleets, but also private individuals, of course, the early adopters were people that really wanted to show their commitment to sustainability and purchase a rather expensive vehicle to just show that they wouldn't pollute as much anymore as they did in the past. So in California, there was a big uptake of these kind of vehicles. I think it's also not a coincidence that Tesla is basically born in California, where it has a very big customer base, especially in the beginning.
Although they threatened recently to move to Texas.
Yeah. I think that was one of those threats. Of course, you have to fight for best solutions with your government as well. So I can totally see that happening. But so where it is basically the real pure innovation with a lot of early adopters, the second big wave, to be honest, and it's especially in Europe, because interestingly enough, what you probably wouldn't expect, the largest markets for Tesla outside the US for a long time have been Norway and Netherlands. And the main reasons for those is actually tax breaks. So people that have a electric vehicle as a company car would pay a lower amount benefit in kind. So yeah, you have taxes in Europe, and also taxes on company vehicles, and that can be as high as 25% of the value of your car, which you'll be taxed in your income tax. But there have been tax breaks for electric vehicles in many countries in Europe, and Hong Kong, for instance, as well. So that's actually a good example. In Hong Kong, you have very high tax on vehicles, about 100%, and then that was dropped for electric vehicles. And then suddenly there were 8,000 Model S vehicles, Tesla Model S vehicles in Hong Kong, which is an incredible market share in such a very, very small market. So, and then companies, of course, also look at the benefits of electricity cost compared to fuel consumption and the lower cost of maintenance, which are actually very visible if you look at the monthly lease of a vehicle. Because for individual companies, it's very hard to understand the residual value, depreciation on vehicles, maintenance cost, even insurance cost on electric vehicles. But we have our collective insight in this technology is embedded in our monthly leases. So our monthly leases include the cost of maintenance, include depreciation. So cars like a Model S or a Model X or vehicles from other suppliers, other brands, will never be the cheapest cars, also not to lease. But you see part of the investment that you make coming back in lower operating cost. So very transparent actually in a monthly lease. So basically, this is how we help companies and individual people to understand the cost of use of these vehicles.
From a adoption point of view, what are the types of things that have been initiated here in the UAE from a regulation perspective that you think have been good so far?
Well, I think very early on, UAE has shown a big interest in this technology. and has not been defensive at all in terms of, well, we are more in oil, so we don't like electric vehicles. Actually, I was working with Tesla when we sold the first, let's say, batch of 200 Model X vehicles to RTA that were used for airport transportation. Basically, from that perspective, also to very early on understand the technology, but also to build a showcase of a country that wants to prove that it's interested in all sorts of technology and not just in forever continue to bet on oil. So this sparked a trend that with the visibility of these vehicles and therefore actually also the establishment of Tesla in Dubai, that would be more available for others. So that definitely helped. And I think now, so the government has made a much bigger step with a commitment to have a large part of their government fleet to be electric vehicles. So government entities in the UAE are pushed to have a certain part of their fleet to be electric vehicles. And we're ready to supply that. We're already doing that. But of course, we have to be there as well to support this great initiative.
And, do you envisage extra benefits for companies like you to adopt electric vehicles in terms of incentives or easier regulation?
Well, actually, not so much. So this is more something that is the business case for ourselves is just basically the in itself, the opportunities in the market itself. We don't actually even require specific support to be able to do this. We made these investments in understanding the technology and learning on the way ourselves. And actually, I think the benefit of that is that it has given us a competitive edge over competitors that more reluctantly have looked at electric vehicles and been thinking, well, this is probably something that might never catch on or may not catch on in this part of the world. And we'll get there. We'll see when we get there. And the fact that we actually had to make these investments ourselves and there were no facilities more generic for companies to use and develop these skills, that we, I dare saying that we are the only ones in the Middle East that actually truthfully understand this technology and operate these at the best we can.
Judging by the way our conversation went, it seems that electric vehicle trend is more imminent than the autonomous driving. When we hear the words autonomous driving, I don't know about you, but I think generally people get a little worried because they might think, there's going to be an accident, I've lost control, I'm playing my computer while I'm behind the wheel or something like that. Is that, what do you think of autonomous driving? Is it something that we'll see, and how far away is it?
It's very near. I think it's very. If you go to the Tesla website, you can see clips of cars driving themselves to the Palo Alto head office, with somebody behind the wheel but not touching the wheel. Car making room for cyclists, stopping for traffic lights, taking left, right turns, and park itself when it arrives at the office. So that basically shows what is possible today. I think the things that are in the way of that of full implementation currently is that, of course, there is also the risk of trips that do not go as flawless as what you would find on a brand's website. So of course there is still a risk of error, and error could lead to death. So that is accidents that could include death. So I think the industry has to be really, really careful, but not just the industry, because it's not even so much in the hands of the industry. The industry can only develop to perfectionism this technology to allow countries to open up legislation for the use of driverless vehicles, because to operate a vehicle, you need to be in it and you need to have a driver's license. You even have to have your hands on the wheel. So cars that currently allow autonomous driving, after 10 seconds or so, you will get a message. So you have to take back control of the wheel, because otherwise we'll just stop this. So it's basically fully controlled. And it's just with the development of the technology. And I think 5G networks is a big step, because obviously if your route is planned using maps that are based on online information, and suddenly your internet would be cut, and you would be just taking a left turn. That in itself is already a risk. So the connection with vehicles, the mapping of the world, just to make sure every road, every intersection, everything is on there. And then one step further for vehicles to actually recognize when situations have changed and anticipate on that. So there is a lot to be developed, but at the same time, technology is already very, very advanced. Of course, some of the options I just mentioned, so lane keeping, following the car that's in front of you, staying in a certain speed, taking turns, are things that are cars that you can buy today, are capable of. But obviously the technology that exists but yet not implemented is already more advanced. So there are different players that do experiments, and then every now and then, of course, unfortunately, you hear about accidents. But this is the only way to get there, to get to ultimately that a self-driving car is more safe than a humanly operated car.
I think there's analogies, comparisons compared with when, you know, the automobile was on, the motor engine was coming on maybe 100 years ago or so, and people said it broke down a lot and there was more accidents on the horse and cart, and eventually it was adopted. But sticking with that theme and technology, you know, we're in the automotive and transport industry, we're used to similar brands, we're used to what they do and the business models around them. And you mentioned technology. Much of what you're talking about is being developed by Google's Waymo, is it? And then other companies like that. So they don't actually own a fleet, they just own the technology. And then big companies have to make the choice of whether to use that service, that technology or software, or create their own. And in again, another kind of analogy with the smartphone space, people used either iOS or Android. Last weekend or over last week, we saw that Volkswagen came out publicly and said that they're going to create their own software. So they're going to, they think that they can build something as good as Google, basically, and Apple. What's your view on that in terms of your business? Do you think you'll be adopting software produced by others or by your partners?
So we will use the best software we can have, and we will always tailor that a little bit to make it exactly fit the needs of our customers. So rather than developing, we don't have the developing power that Google has. We're not even trying, but we will use, if they have the best solution, we will use that solution. And potentially adapt it slightly to make it Massar specific. So we believe you can, especially a company of our size, you can only be good in so many things. So we have a lot of knowledge about fleets, cars, operating fleet, the technology, just in the periphery of that. And then very quickly, it comes to a level of technology where the cost of development of that technology are so high that we would never be able to fund that, where we use others. So we actually, we're very ambitious, but we also understand our own boundaries.
Talking about that ambition and something you alluded to earlier, how do you expand Massar solutions across the region? Do you work with partners? Do you set up entities in different countries? And how do you think the Middle East or MENA region can be like Europe or like the US in your industry?
Yeah, so internationalization of is a big trend, and I think I addressed it briefly in the opening, where you see that international corporate companies want to have the same solution in all the countries where they operate. The market can offer those solutions, but actually with the exception of the Middle East. Also actually in Africa and many Southeast Asian countries, also hard to find. But in the Middle East, there is not one provider that actually operates in more than one country. Whereas at the same time, we see the need of international companies. They would love to see a Massar or somebody else offering a fleet solution for 7, 8, 9 countries in the Middle East. And so we even have customers that ask us, saying, well, we're quite happy with the services you provide today, but we're also in Saudi Arabia, we're in Kuwait, we're opening in Bahrain. How can you support us there? So basically, our short-term strategy, weren't it for the pandemic, we would have already been active in Saudi Arabia, opening our first office there in Riyadh. So we will replicate the model that we have in the UAE, so Massar Solutions, to become Massar Solutions Middle East, with replications basically of our current model in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, Oman, potentially Jordan and Egypt, very large market as well. Because we see that there's just this gap in the market. There is nobody offering that. And we think that we could offer those services to our existing international customers, but also basically every international corporate company that has a footprint in those countries will want to work with us because there's nobody else.
Fascinating. That's interesting. And I think it's, similar trends that people are looking across this region and providing the best in class services to different countries. So wish you luck with that. Before we finish, I'd like to just talk about another trend about smart cities and the future. We see things like Hyperloop being built and coming online soon. What people in the tech space sometimes say that their ideal city, if it was built from the start up, would look different, and they always think of mobility as the base. How do you view that? Do you think that everything needs to be completely changed, or do you think that in Abu Dhabi and Dubai and in the UAE, we're very close to how a future ideal city in terms of mobility would be?
Well, I think although our business model is based on mobility, I think in an ideal world, you would need less mobility because commuting is cost, can be a not sustainable and non-sustainable energy option many times, but also could even be a waste of time. So if you have to drive to work every day for an hour, or to get your groceries, or anything that includes the need for mobility, actually you're wasting resources, and one of them being your own time. So when this can be organized better, that's of course the ideal world. And I don't think that is tomorrow's world, but it will be in the future. Now, I hope that is our future, where obviously that would have impact on the business model of companies like Massar, but we would just have to adapt. And this is also something that would not happen overnight. Probably there's a big planning phase that goes ahead, so it will also allow us time to plan how we fit in. But that's an ideal world where you have less mobility needed.
Fascinating. Okay, well, thank you very much for your time this morning, Richard, and hopefully keep in touch in the future. And great to hear about your business.
Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you, Richard.
Thanks very much.
Hey guys, I'm Richard Fitzgerald. This is Dubai Works, where we interview the business leaders making a difference in this great city.
That business with scalability was very interesting to me.
I like building something that has legacy.